Advantages and disadvantages of happiness. As mentioned earlier, the Buddha examined the advantages and disadvantages of all things. In the case that something still possesses both advantages and disadvantages, he would then describe how one may pass beyond them. That is, he would explain how further development is possible. Looking at things in this way enables continual development. When one reaches a particular point, one acknowledges both its advantages sada and disadvantages dinawa. One then looks for the way out, nisarana, leading to the next stage, and one develops the necessary conditions to move on. In whatever work or activity one is engaged, the examination of these three factors leads to ongoing development. One does not get lost in thinking that one has reached completion. One does not stop making effort and become passive, negligent, and heedless, which results in missed opportunities. Let us now look at the advantages and disadvantages of happiness, rather than go into a detailed analysis of the many different kinds and stages of happiness. Here the discussion will focus on some primary features of happiness that are related to other spiritual qualities and that pertain to people's everyday life. One such spiritual quality, which is relevant to everyone and is connected to meditation, to spiritual practice, and to every aspect of learning, is concentration, samadhi. Happiness is expressly valuable to concentration. The Pali Canon states, Sukha pada tano samadhi. Happiness is a basis and criterion for concentration. It is a proximate cause for concentration. The literal meaning of sukha, happiness, is convenient or easy. One is free from pressure, obstruction, affliction, struggle, agitation, and anxiety. In other words, one is peaceful. Happiness leads to peace. When the mind is peaceful, concentration arises easily. A happy and tranquil mind is prepared for concentration. Happiness is a characteristic of a high quality of life. Arahants, for example, when they are not engaged in a specific activity, dwell in the state of mind referred to as abiding at ease in the present. Dittadhamma sukha vihara, which is most often a state of jhana. There are many disadvantages of happiness. In particular, happiness may lead to carelessness, infatuation, obsession, indulgence, procrastination, indifference, or laziness. Concentration, which is based on happiness, has similar disadvantages. In Pali, concentration is sometimes referred to as belonging to the same faction as laziness, kosajapaka. At the same time, however, concentration belongs to the 37 factors of enlightenment, bodhipakkhiya. Concentration is directly associated with awakening. It lies alongside awakening. Awakening is dependent on concentration. Here, simply note that concentration is a factor of enlightenment, but that it is also associated with laziness. When one examines spiritual qualities, do not only look at their advantages, also acknowledge their disadvantages. Be careful. If one develops concentration incorrectly, one will give rise to laziness. The Buddha in this case encouraged the application of mindfulness for inspection and caution. When one attains concentration, one asks, Has this concentration deviated towards idleness and inertia? Has it become an impediment? The heedless indulgence in the pleasure of concentration is harmful. One must be careful and know how to apply concentration. Do not fall into heedlessness. When people experience happiness, especially sense pleasure, it is very likely that they will become carried away, infatuated, and enchanted by it, resulting in heedlessness. When experiencing happiness, they lose a sense of urgency and do not wish to do anything else. Although there remain things to be done, they become negligent, indifferent, and indolent, resulting in a weak character. For this reason, those people who have experienced happiness and yet remain unmindful, who are indulgent, apathetic, and heedless, become weak and corrupted. They may even meet with calamity and ruin. Many individuals, communities, nations, and even civilizations throughout history have fallen into this cycle of decline. When looking at these disadvantages, it may appear that happiness is of very low value. But happiness is simply happiness. It is the corrupted and defiled human beings themselves who deal with happiness incorrectly, and thus end up experiencing harmful effects. Here we must return to the subject of sense pleasure, which has a bearing on almost everyone's life. Although we have discussed sense pleasure already, here we will focus on it directly in relation to spiritual practice. The dangers or disadvantages of sense pleasure, of happiness dependent on material things and serving personal gratification, are extensive, and people thus require the supervision or protection by way of the 5 precepts. This points to a basic drawback or weakness of sense pleasure. It is a cause for competition and exploitation among human beings. The things providing gratification are external, and they are insufficient in number to fulfill the desires of everyone. Because each person desires things for himself and wishes to obtain the maximum amount of these things, they see each other as adversaries. People thus conflict and compete with one another. This is followed by deception, dishonesty, and deceit, a search for followers and the pursuit of power, and various forms of persecution and abuse. The pursuit of sense pleasure is the source of conflict and oppression between people and between nations. It is the source of war, leading to all kinds of suffering and affliction. People then search without end for a solution. Their voices call for peace, but their hands brandish swords. This is the first danger of sense pleasure. Social oppression which spreads suffering outwards has its root in the mind, i.e., an insatiable desire, which is a common characteristic of craving tanha. Moreover, this insatiability, which conforms to a voracious hunger for things and an inability to feel one has enough, creates suffering within an individual. The more people get, the more they want. A specific degree or amount of things that once provided happiness is eventually no longer satisfactory. The feeling of joy and excitement is replaced by indifference, apathy, and a sense of ennui. Once boredom sets in, those things that at one time seemed indispensable now must simply be endured. Those things that once provided happiness are now a cause for suffering. The nature of desire has changed. Now one may wish for the object to go away, to disappear. This is one form of affliction. At one time one may have been penniless. If one obtains $30, one is over the moon, and when one earns a wage of $30 a day, one is exceedingly happy. Even eventually one wishes to earn $3,000 a day. One imagines that with such a wage all of one's desires will be fulfilled, and one will experience delight. Indeed, if it happens that one earns such a wage, at first one is blissful and content. A closer look at this dynamic reveals the gradual expansion of craving in two ways. First, when one obtains a regular wage of $3,000 per day, if one day one only obtains $30, an amount that had at one time provided a great sense of joy, one is unhappy. The same thing that once provided happiness now causes suffering. Second, although one may have been convinced that by earning a wage of $3,000 per day, one wouldn't wish for anything more, eventually one feels apathy and boredom. One then thinks that one needs to earn a wage of $30,000 a day in order to feel satisfied. This target will increase without end. The Buddha stated that even if one were to turn a mountain into gold, it would still not gratify the desire of one individual. Because this desire is insatiable, as mentioned above, the Buddha emphasized this subject repeatedly, so that his disciples would recognize that human desire is limitless, craving is endless. This desire creates oppression and affliction in society, and it also creates layers of suffering within an individual. One aspect to this suffering is the feeling of boredom and apathy.